Welcome, welcome. Um, this is going to be the rest of chapter 3 and hopefully up to chapter 6 of 1,000 Pounds of Wildfire. And I have no idea where I left off. So, hold on. So I can just check my channel. Okay, never mind. I know exactly where I left off. Well, let's get started. Last we left off was at I Got Over It, obviously, when Jamie was talking about his time in the military. So the paragraph to start after that. She grins at him and he can't help but mirror her. It's then he realizes their closeness. All he has to do is reach over a few inches and he'd be able to place his hand on her knee. A few fucking inches and he could claim her lips. He feels a jolt and his breath hitches. Arya places her fingers in between where They were splayed, palm down, on the tabletop. The feel of her small hand, small, slim fingers, twined in amid his large ones, was such a small gesture, but it feels like more. He looks to her, and she's looking at him, silently waiting. All it would take is just dropping his head a few inches, and he'd know. He'd know what it's like to kiss her. She breathes out, and she's so close that he can feel her breath. This close, he can smell her shampoo, not floral, but something, and a faint hint of cigarette. And suddenly, he doesn't give a fuck whose daughter she is, or that she's 16, or that she plots murder in a plaid skirt and knee socks. It's because she's so much more than that. He hasn't even realized his free hand cupped the back of her head until he's aware of the thick hair enveloping his hand. Without breaking eye contact, he slowly brings her face up as he bends his down, and that's when the low buzz of the phone vibration shocks them both. They spring apart and blink at each other, too stunned to make a move or say anything. It's Arya who darts her eyes to the table and sees that it's her phone. She gets up and rounds the table to check, and Jamie takes the brief moment to collect himself. He wipes his hands on his thighs and closes his eyes, silently cursing. I should probably get home, Arya says in a shaky voice. Of course, Jamie replies as nonchalantly as he can. He gets up and faces her. Can I? Do you want to ride home? Arya looks down at her phone before shoving it in the back pocket of her jeans. Yeah. Can we? She offers a smile. Can we take your motorcycle? She's looking at the reflection in the brushed metal doors of the elevator as they make their way down to the garage. She's so much smaller than he is, and it's never really occurred to her by how much Arya is hardly up to his shoulder, and how weird is it that they are the complete opposites physically, yet quite the same in every other way. The elevator stops on the fourth floor, and a handful of people get on. She's about to step back and give room to the new occupants when Jamie reaches down and wraps his arm around her shoulders, pulling her in a few steps backwards. When the door closes, she expects him to let her go, but he doesn't. Arya wants to jump up and down or crawl out of her skin, but fortunately for the other passengers, she doesn't. Instead, she smiles at her feet before she tentatively reaches up and grips the back of Jamie's jacket. She can't stand to look up at his reaction to that, but she does hear him clear his throat and pull her a little tighter to his side. Even as they reach the garage, he doesn't let go of her until they reach his bike. He gives the helmet to her. Don't you think you ought to get another one of these? Jamie gives her a curious look. Maybe I'm not used to giving anyone, let alone young maidens, rides on this trusty steed. He mounts the bike, for her to put the helmet on. She looks down at the helmet in her hands, then quickly puts it on. Perhaps young maidens want more than one ride. Arya places Arya places her hands on his broad shoulders as leverage to straddle the seat behind him. In a fit of bravery, she darts her arms underneath his, feeling her way down his chest before they rest around his stomach, where she interlocks her fingers, bracing for the roar of the engine. She can feel him tense up, and he's still for a few beats before they dash out into the night. She slides off the bike when he stops in front of her house. Arya couldn't stop smiling the entire ride. Her body was buzzing with an electricity she'd never felt before. No wonder Sansa and her stupid friends bounce up and down and squeal when talking about boys. That's exactly what she feels like doing. Arya takes off the helmet as she's facing him and he reaches for it, but Arya hesitates and keeps it clutched in her hands, scuffing a shoe on the pavement. She takes a deep breath, and in one movement, she pushes the helmet into his hands and leans over and kisses him on the cheek. It's quick and barely a peck, but it's enough for her to feel his cold skin and soft stubble. It isn't rough like she thought it would be. The smell of him is regal and exotic, and although she wants to linger there and nestle her face into his neck, she just can't. When she pulls away, Jamie looks dumbfounded, and slack-jawed. Her own face is burning, and it doesn't help when Jamie reaches for her hands, skimming her knuckles delicately. Neither of them says anything when she tugs her hand back, turning away from him. She focuses on her feet as she goes through the open gate and up the long drive. Jamie's motorcycle is still idling where she left him, but she doesn't have the nerve. Welcome, welcome. But she doesn't have the nerve to look over her shoulder. It isn't until she's inside, leaning against the closed doors, that she hears him leave. I got started. And that's okay. And as you can see, I have space and I'm no longer doing this in the living room. And this chair is driving me crazy. There we go. It's the next Saturday, and Arya is buried under her covers. It's the first official day of spring break, and she sighs in relief. She's been spending her nights no longer focused on Joffrey and the great many ways she could enact revenge, but on Jaime Lannister and how he's in her head and her heart in a constant loop. There's banging on the doors downstairs, and Arya groans, flopping a pillow on her head. She's about to drift off again until she hears familiar male voices and her little brother's yammering away. She sits up and listens to a laugh she hasn't heard in ages. John. Arya bounds down the stairs and runs into the kitchen to find everyone congregated there. There you are! Oof! John stammers as she launches herself into his arms. She laughs as he spins her. I've missed you, they say in unison. John chuckles as he puts her down. Oh, I see. Don't even miss your brother, Rob says, sounding put upon. He's resting his elbows on the kitchen island next to Bran, who seated himself on the counter. Bran's shoveling fistfuls of dry cereal in his mouth, completely unfazed by their mother's warning to stop because she's making breakfast. I didn't see you there, Arya says, slightly shamed. What are you doing here? I thought you wouldn't be here until Monday. Rob meanders over to her. Ask John. He couldn't wait. He brings her in for a headlock and plants a rough kiss on the top of her head before wandering over to the stove to inspect the food cooking. Not that I mind, he says. I can't remember the last time I had a decent meal. Rob reaches over for a strip of bacon. Catlin shoos him away. You should learn to cook, Sansa volunteers from the kitchen table, face hidden behind her phone screen. Really? This coming from Master Chef Sansa? Remember that time? Not that I don't want you boys home, but a little warning might have been nice, Catlin interrupts a little loudly, waving her spatula in Rob's direction. I could have prepared something special. Now you'll just have to eat what I can find. Ned comes in then and is immediately greeted by Rickon, who starts yanking on the hair away while he envelops Rob and John in man-slapping hugs. When Father's attention is on Rob in the drive over, John leans over and whispers into Arya's ear. After breakfast, we'll go on a walk, all right? Arya smiles and nods, eager to have John to herself. Once the house is out of sight, John reaches into his pocket and flips open a pack of cigarettes and hands Arya one. He looks over his shoulder before lighting his, then hers. Arya knows where they're going. They used to run away and play for hours at the old groundskeeper's house that sat dormant on their property for over a century. So, John says, how are things? Fine. Why? She looks up at him as they walk, but he doesn't look at her. There's something going on, she suspects, but doesn't know quite what yet. Just, he shrugs his shoulders. Okay, Arya says hesitantly. How's your girlfriend? The redhead? John lets out a breath and kicks a clump of dirt. You regret? She dumped me. Arya can't believe her ears. What woman would ever dump John? He's perfect, smart, funny, good-looking, maybe a little broody, but still. Why? He takes a drag of the cigarette. She says it's because I spend too much time studying and that I'm not all into protests and marches or taking down the patriarchy or something, he grimaces. You're in college, Arya reasons. You're supposed to study. John finally looks at her and lifts his eyebrow in agreement. Wasn't just that. She said it was a mark of my privilege and that I'm an English major and not something more useful. Her words, not mine. Arya halts in her tracks and turns John towards her. That is really fucking stupid, and she's even stupider for saying that. She's angry on his behalf, though she doesn't quite know how close they were or how serious. But a slight to John is a slight to her as well. Maybe this is why she's getting a sort of off feeling from John. We stand. John nudges her and they continue down the slope. Arya judges that she's far enough away from the house that she can just drop her cigarette butt here on the ground without anyone finding it. It's over, he says simply. She's already dating someone else. He smiles. He's got hand tattoos and a beard, plays a banjo for an outlaw bluegrass band or something. Arya is horrified. Sounds like you asked a little too casually. Me what? John scratches his head like love life. Arya almost trips, but manages not to. I mean, you'd tell me, right? He stops, so she does too, and he's looking anywhere but at her. If you were dating someone or seeing someone, he trails off and looks so uncomfortable that Arya wants to laugh at him. Instead of laughing, she narrows her eyes and tries to get him to make eye contact with her. What is this about? John groans. It was Sansa. She called me. Why is Sansa calling you? She called and said I should come home early and talk to you, since you won't talk to her about... He closes his eyes. Are you involved with Jaime Lannister? Arya freezes in place. Her first instinct is denial, even though it is John. The word involved has so many connotations, and she isn't sure which one suits their situation the best. Or at least which one John would admit to the least. She can't sum it up into a smooth narrative that would explain why it is she spends time with a man twice her age, or at least a narrative that doesn't focus on legalities or morality. Yes, she's involved with him in ways she hasn't ever been to another person before. That's why every look, every small touch is so momentous when from an outside perspective it's platonic and innocent. When something so simple as an arm around her shoulders becomes more than what it is physically and becomes a seismatic shift from maybe to yes, Arya had been daring enough to breach the gap that had been slowly closing between them already with a small kiss on the cheek. Something she'd done to John 1,000 times. But with Jamie, it carried so much more weight, so much implied but not spoken. She opens her mouth to say something. Is it romantic, you and him? I. So what if it is? She asks quietly and seriously. Though perhaps romantic isn't quite the appropriate measurement of their relationship, not yet, anyway. Arya glances around at the Winterfell grounds and wishes she could be anywhere else but here. There's anger bubbling up within her, and directed at John, directed at Sansa, directed at herself. What if it is? She repeats brazenly. Am I not allowed to date anyone? Is that it? Can I not be trusted to make my own decisions? You're 16, Arya, and he's what, 40? John asks in disbelief. He's 37, actually, Arya responds defiantly. He's an asshole. He is not, she says a little too vehemently. Arya scrunches up her face and takes a breath. Okay, I mean, he is an asshole, but not to me. It's just, you don't really know him. He's not manipulating me or taking advantage of me. I know that's what you're thinking. She's desperate to plead her case to John and thinks that maybe the plotting to murder Joffrey explanation would have been easier. Can you blame me? John demands, sounding hurt and incensed. No, no, we cannot. We love John. This candle is kind of pissing me off. That is okay. 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 Do you really think I'd allow that to happen, John? Honestly. That any good looking guy will just wink at me and I just become a quivering, delicate flower? I'm not Sansa, you know. I can handle myself. And more than anything, I need you to trust me. Not like I trusted Sansa not to say anything. The cow. John looks like he wants to press the point more, but takes her by the shoulders instead and studies her. You sure about this? Arya doesn't respond, and John brushes the hair out of her eyes. If it gets to be too much, or if you're out of your depth, if he hurts you, tell me. Understand? He brings her into such a tight hug she can hardly breathe. I love you more than anything in this world, Arya. Arya sinks further into John and wraps her arms around him. John invites her to lunch that afternoon, offering to take her to meet his friend, Sam. Kitty cat. Ooh, your shoulders are tight, my lady. But that is okay. Just a headshot of lady. That's a weird beating gift. Not gonna lie. She can chill. No, thank you. No, fuck this cord. Okay. You'll like him, he says as they're driving through town. He's really smart, like really smart. He's getting his PhD in chemical engineering, and he's hardly older than I am. Skipped the master's program, even. Can you even do that? Arya asks. If you're Sam, you can, I guess. They sit in silence, and Arya doesn't like it. There's something in the air between them, despite John's declaration earlier. He keeps glancing at her, and it's irritating her more and more. Just say it, she grits out. Hmm? Stop bullshitting me and tell me why you keep looking at me like that. I'm not John. Jamie Lannister? Really? They stop at the stoplight. He takes the opportunity to light a cigarette. At least just tell me how this all started. Arya, she sighs and lights a cigarette of her own at the courthouse for Joffrey's trial. He practically cornered me to apologize for Joffrey. It was serendipitous, I see, he teases. Arya whacks him in the arm. Shut up! Arya does like Sam. He's soft spoken, with a friendly face, and grabs Arya into a hug as soon as she meets him. So you're Arya. I'm happy to meet you. John talks about you all the time. She elbows John as soon as they sit down and asks how they met. Sam turns red as the waitress comes to take their orders. Oh, that? Well, there was this Tex-Mex place by campus students would go to all the time. I've actually seen John there before I knew him. Anyway, there was this waitress. She was pregnant at the time, and this customer kept bothering her, pinching her rear end, saying really vile things. I guess I had enough and asked him to politely stop. You should have seen the guy, Arya. John interjects. He was like 6'3" at least, and Sam just stood right up and told him to knock that shit off. Sam chuckles, clearly embarrassed. To be fair, he would have punched me if John hadn't stood up and backed me up. Arya smiles because that's exactly what John would have done. What would you have done if he did punch you? She asks as their food comes. Sam frowns and looks down at his plate before looking up at her and shrugging, taking the punch, I guess. Arya listens to John and Sam as they tell stories and joke around, and it's nice. Sam starts talking about finishing his dissertation, and Arya asks what it's about. Wildfire, Sam answers. It's really interesting. Did you know that back in the olden days it was liquid and had to be kept in clay pots? Back then it was really fickle and dangerous. Nowadays, though, it's in solid form. It's still used for mining and deep sea drilling and whatnot. Now, my dissertation is on the properties it gains in its chiral form. Sam continues, and Arya tries to listen. But once he starts using complex chemistry terms, she's lost. She doesn't mind because Sam is enjoying explaining it to her. 14-year-old Maya Stone was directly hit by an unknown 1980s sedan in a hit-and-run while riding her bicycle on Vale Avenue. Police are unable to determine motive. Grainy video footage from a neighbor's security camera captured the vehicle speeding away. Any witnesses are encouraged to come forward. A school photo of the girl accompanies the article. Black hair, blue eyes. Black hair, blue eyes, Maya Stone. He grips his phone a little harder, focusing on the picture of the girl. Something is creeping up in the back of his mind. There's something familiar about her name and those eyes, but nothing solid is taking shape. The phone startles him, and the phone icon and Tyrion's name now replace the news article on his screen. Jamie sighs and answers. What do you want? What are you doing? What do you want? Oh, you happy to have our own space again? I'm happy to have our own space. Cheez-Its. Not sponsored. I just have a box of Cheez-Its. Okay. 1,000 pounds of wildfire. Chapter 4. Summary. Wandering around the wilderness, target practice, fancy sandwiches, and some things are serendipitous. Jamie sighs and answers. Yes, I've signed the papers, Jamie says, by way of saying hello. Oh, yes, well, that's good news. Instead of giving them to me, you're free to join the meeting this week. Pycelle was inquiring after you the other day. Jamie flinches. Why would I do that? I don't give a shit about Pycelle, and I'd rather die than subject myself to that business suit circle jerk. Prefer your circle jerks in camouflage, Tyrion jokes. Is that why you've called, hoping I'll regale you with tales of lonely desert nights with my brothers in arms? Jamie reaches for the pack of cigarettes that hasn't moved since Arya left them. He doesn't have a suitable ashtray, so he fills a mug with water. Wedging the phone between his shoulder and his ear, he rifles through the kitchen door for a light. Maybe next time, Tyrion Tyrion says as Jamie sits at the kitchen table and lights the cigarette. Actually, I'm playing the dutiful brother and informing you Cersei is demanding your presence at a family dinner, hosted by her, of course. I could be crying. No, I've got a cat scratching at my door. Fire. Anyone help? Anyone help? Never mind, it's the black one. Okay. Why doesn't Cersei ask me herself? Tyrion laughs. You think our sweet sister would deign to explain her reasons to me? Assuming she follows some sort of reason or logic. Damien leans back in his chair and watches the smoke curl up to the ceiling. I just assumed you two weren't talking again. I just assumed you two weren't talking again. I don't want to, Jamie says uh, petulantly, and she isn't talking to me. Not that I mind. What does she mean by family exactly? Who's going to be there? I don't know. She just called and barked orders at me before hanging up. You might want to consider it if Uncle Paget is going. He'll irritate Cersei into a complete meltdown. It'll be worth it just for that. Gods, Jamie says, thinking of their uncle. Remember when we went to the summer and Ashemark and Cersei got to spend all our time shopping, but you and I had to be locked up in Uncle Tyget's study, where he would give us life lessons by speaking in only Vince Lombardi quotes. Aw, kitty kitty. Anyway, Tyrion finishes and they both groan at the memory. Whatever you decide to let Cersei know, I don't want to be her bad news. She'll do that screeching banshee thing I'm so fond of. I'd wish you go, if only to keep me sane. They're your family too, yes, as I am constantly reminded. I'll think about it, is what Jamie says, although he knows he'll go. Okay. 2 weeks back into school, and Arya is staring at a textbook. Staring is the exact right word, since what she's doing wouldn't be considered reading. She flops her head down on the open pages and consoles herself by remembering it's Friday. Arya has been in equal parts edgy temper and girlish glee since seeing Jamie last. The longer she's been away from him, the more time she has to mull over her actions and second guess them. What is it they share isn't one-sided. She's certain, but Arya has no clue what she is supposed to do now. She supposes she could ask Sansa. Gods knows Sansa would love that. But she's not speaking to her at the moment, too hurt by her betrayal. John has already returned to university. Even if she did talk to him, she wouldn't be sure what to say. Jamie texted her earlier in the week asking if she wanted to come over for dinner soon, and she answered okay. But when he asked when, Arya made some vague excuse about school and said she wasn't sure, all because she was scared. Scared to face him, but scared her inaction would be misconstrued as disinterest. Jesus. She kissed him on the cheek, not given him a blowjob. Her phone buzzes and she darts to the bed. The number, now familiar, gives her pause. Arya blows air out of her cheeks and answers as casually as she can. Hello, Jamie. Arya, I was beginning to think you were avoiding me, he says, and Arya is happy to hear his voice. She's missed the low, measured cadence. No, it's just, school. Ah, I see. I was thinking of going shooting. Shooting? Arya gasps, not even bothering to hide her excitement. Guns. And that gets her apprehension to speaking with him. No, heroin. That plan would be to spend the day together in Flea Bottom, taking the local color. She ignores that. Do you mean it? You'll teach me? Really? When? Jamie laughs at her enthusiasm. Yes, really, and tomorrow, if you're free. There's a place up on St. Aegon's Blackwater River. Be dressed to hike. We'll be gone most of the day. There's a strain in his voice, and she can just picture him flopping down on that terrible couch of his. Thank you, Jamie. This is so cool. Tomorrow morning, bright and early, I'll pick you up. He smiles to himself and he sees her sitting on the sidewalk fiddling with her phone. After not seeing her for 14 days, it's like seeing her for the first time all over again. His pulse quickens. Jamie thinks briefly about honking the horn to startle her, but thinks better of it. No need to alert the rest of the Stark household that Jamie Lannister is taking their teenage daughter out to the mountainous wilderness to shoot firearms. It amuses him to think what the consequences might be would they were would be might be would they were caught. That makes absolutely no sense, but go off, I guess. Although caught isn't the right word. Technically, they weren't doing anything wrong. Technically, there was no impropriety. Not Now that would be an argument he'd like to engage in with good old Honorable Eddard and thin-lipped Catelyn. They'd be circling their wagons around Arya, pitchforks at the ready, and calling for his head. Let them come. She's worth it, especially when he sees her bounding up to his car, beaming at him. She hops in and throws her backpack at her feet. You shaved. Oh, I did, he says, stretching up and examining himself in the rearview mirror. He's taken aback that she's noticed. Why? Don't like it? No, you look good, Arya says casually as she's fastening her seatbelt. I like the beard better, though. Jamie is moved by the observation or implication she found him attractive, and it takes him a moment to pull away from the curb. Arya leans over and rummages through her backpack. Here, this is for you. Jamie looks down to find her lodging a thermos into the center console. Coffee, black, with sugar. How do you know how I take my coffee? Jamie can feel Arya look at him. When you took me to that diner, she says, as if it was obvious, you only put sugar in it, although that is probably better since my mother only buys organic Rainforest Alliance coffee. It's right up your alley. He thinks back to that day and he vaguely remembers the coffee, his attention fixated on Arya at the time, and he swallows. Up my alley, Jamie nods. It seems you've taken well to grooming. You've done this before then. Groom many girls, do you? Arya asks, raising a playful eyebrow. No, usually women just throw themselves at me, wanting to please me. You see, Jamie answers lightheartedly. Her he doesn't need to see her to know she's rolling her eyes at him. It's half an hour into the drive, and they're starting to voyage further into the King's Road range. The conifers and hills begin to enclose them, and the road turns to two lanes. The Bay to St. Aegon's is still another 30 minutes away, and Jamie's enjoying the drive. At least until the subject of baseball is brought up. It began with arguing over teams, arguing over spring training, which led them to argue about what the most difficult position is. It's third base. It's third base. That's why they call it the hot spot, Jamie says louder than he intended. Shortstop is, Arya counters. You have to be fast and you have the most responsibilities. You guide the rest of your team. You have a you have to have a good arm for third base, which is the whole point of the game. Arya scoffs in disbelief. A good arm? Then you may as well say it's the hardest one. The hardest one is first base. You've just proven my point, Jamie tilts his head. If you can't throw, then even shortstop, designated hitters, Arya says. That throws him off. What about them? Do they need a good arm? Jamie frowns. They don't count. Arya laughs and opens the thermos and takes a sip. His eyes are on the road and he absentmindedly gestures for the coffee. She hands it to him and he's about to take a sip of his own. You know, catcher is probably the hardest if you think about it. He hands it back and Arya screws the cap on. She turns to him as much as she can in her seat. You might be right about that, actually. Jamie smiles triumphantly and she says, Sergio Farrell was the best catcher ever. His jaw drops and he lets out an indignant huff. What, better than Barristan Semley? Are you kidding me? Farrell spent the first 4 years of his career on a minor league Japanese team. Selmy played your precious shortstop too, you know. Selmy is one of my favorites too. Not that I was ever a big Stormlanders fan. I just think Farrell was the better catcher. Jamie shakes his head. You're making me regret our little field trip. That's 'cause you know I'm right. All arguments on baseball are forgotten by the time they pull off into the shoulder. They step out and Jamie breathes in. The air here is crisper and cleaner, and Arya looks around, pleased look on her face. He grabs his backpack from the trunk and tosses a paper sack at Arya. She's caught off guard, but catches it easily. What's this? Lunch? I said we'd be here all day. Arya smacks herself in the forehead. I can't believe I didn't think about that. Think of that, she says as she squats down to put it in her own bag. Jamie shuts the trunk and shoulders his bag. So I'm the dashing good looks and the brains of this outfit? What exactly do you contribute? Arya gives him a withering look. Apparently not reining in your ego. Jamie laughs quietly and curls his arm around her, leading away from the highway towards the access road. He resists the urge to kiss the top of her head. Sidekicks. That's what you are in this operation. My plucky, sassy sidekick, he says. Arya elbows him. But not hard enough to pull herself away. Please, you're my sidekick, if anything. I'm the brains and you're the brute strength. I mean, for now anyway. Up until the osteoporosis slows you down. I have crippling depression. I have osteoporosis. Jesus Christ. It's bad. I know too many memes. Anyway. She grins up at him and he narrows his eyes. That's a courageous thing to say, considering I could just leave you here out in the woods. Though you were a feral beast as a child, I wouldn't be surprised if you made a home amongst the bears and wolves. The trail tapers and begins the trail tapers and begins a slow rise. They separate, having to walk single file, and Arya leads the way. She prattles on until they reach the top of the cliff, and there's a clear view of the dense forest below. It's beautiful, Arya breathes. Jamie looks at her. Cool. As she's admiring the view. So are you, he doesn't say. And she is truly. Being out here puts her in a whole different context. I need to stop hitting my space bar. Under the natural light among the untouched wilderness, she's radiant, as if she was meant to trot peace along the forest floor amid the ferns and flowers. She turns to him and catches him staring. She must see something in his face because she starts to blush before turning quickly away. How much further is it? She asks as he directs her towards the trail along the cliff face. A mile or so, I think. Just don't fall and break your hip up here. I don't know if I can drag you all the way down. Jamie stops, cocks his head, and takes a daring step towards the cliff edge. Arya notices he isn't behind her and stops. What? She joins him and stares over the edge too. Oh, when I tossed you over the side, I was wondering which would find your body first, the wild beasts or some unfortunate hiker. Jamie, Arya tisks. If you plan on pitching me over the side, you'll have to catch me first. And with that, she's off like a shot. It takes a moment for his feet to catch up with his brain. He's nearly lost sight of her since the trail bends away from the edge towards even more ground, and Arya is fast and sure-footed. As swift as a deer, but he's also taller and had years of conditioning. As soon as he's close enough, he bends down and grabs her by the legs. Arya squeals as he turns her enough to throw her over his shoulder. He lets out a soft oof as her backpack whacks him in the face. Put me down, she laughs, trying to pound on his back, but hitting his backpack instead. What? Jamie asks, slightly pinning her ankles to him so she'll stop kicking. Arya is laughing and cursing him all the same. Jamie, please. I'm sorry. Us old folks are hard of hearing. Okay, she shrieks. I'm sorry I called you old. Arya squirms around, and Jamie is having a hard time keeping hold of her. Tiny she might be, but she's strong, too. Let this be a lesson, little Stark. You gotta be faster if you don't want to be caught. He slaps her lightly on the back of her leg before lowering her to the ground. Arya is beaming at him, red in the face as she readjusts her shirt and jacket and brushes hair out of her mouth. She gives him a shove with both hands before leading the way down the trail. Maybe I wanted you to catch me, she says to him over her shoulder. He stands there watching the sway of her ponytail. I'm the one who's caught, he thinks. This tiny little minx has imprisoned him, and he is more than willing to submit himself to his jailer. The trudge through the path was more trampled foliage than clear trail. Arya looks above her at the swaying branches. She loves it out here, and the fact that Jamie took her makes it all the more better. He leads the way slightly ahead of her, and she can't help but still looks at him. She'd expected he'd look at a place out here. Jamie Lannister was all posh and urban sophistication, or so she thought. He'd been in perfectly tailored suits and expensive shoes, drove a car that cost more than a year's tuition at her private school, but out here he seems more at ease. Perhaps it was the ruddiness of his cheeks that was brought out by the chiller air that gives her that impression, a sort of youthful glow that wasn't there under the artificial light of his apartment. She smiles to herself as she scampers to catch up to him. He still looks like a model that stepped out of an REI catalog, though. They come to a clearing that's scattered with tree stumps and fallen logs. A sandy hill looms in front of them. All right, here we are, Jamie announces. She follows him into a weather-worn picnic table and takes in the debris on the ground, broken bottle pieces, a bit of garbage, remnants of a fire pit. Jamie places his backpack on top of the table and pulls out a hard plastic case and boxes of ammunition. There are two handguns inside, and Jamie picks one up and motions for Arya to join him on the bench. Eagerly, she slides beside him on her knees and rests her elbows on the table. Jamie scoots close enough to her that their sides are pressing together. This is a Ruger LCR 38. It's lightweight and a good for beginners. Now, there's no safety or hammer. You just pull the trigger. He goes on, explains the parts and what they do, how to load the chamber and speed loaders. Arya is so excited that she's vibrating in her seat. When Jamie asks her to repeat back what he's just told her, she runs her eyes over and repeats without flaw. Proud of herself, she smiles up at him, and he raises both of his eyebrows. Well done, he says. After placing a paper bullseye on a stump and resting a rock on top to keep it from blowing away, Jamie has her stand in front, hands her the gun, and wraps a string of earplugs around her neck. He moves behind her and reaches around to adjust her arms. Arya closes her eyes at the feel of his chest at her back and his hands on hers. Her hands are firmly on the grip, but when he leans down and speaks lowly in her ear, she almost drops it. Jamie is telling her something while adjusting her elbows, her hips, and she tries to focus on his words, but his voice and his breath sends chills down her spine. Biting her lip, she thinks he may have said something about not locking your elbows, but she's not entirely sure. He steps back and she takes that as her cue to put the earplugs in. Arya does her best to duplicate the stance he showed her and takes a deep breath. She fires, and a puff of stand on the side of the hill shows her that although she got it somewhere in the vicinity of the target, it isn't even close. Jamie moves through her again, adjusting her here and there before squeezing her shoulder. The next shots hit the edge of the paper. It's closer to the rings of the target, and she's pleased with herself. She looks to Jamie, and he smiles at her and gives an approving nod. He hands her the speed loader and watches as she ejects the empties with fumbling fingers and reloads. This time, she hits the outer ring with all 5 shots. Arya wants to jump up and down, but instead she reloads what Jamie hands her. She's about to aim again when she turns to him and motions for him to take the gun. He aims one-handed and fires all 5 in such quick succession she hardly has time to catch her breath. To say she's impressed is an understatement, because every single shot has hit the center. "That is really, really badass," she says, gaping at him, awestruck. Her muffled voice reminds her to yank the earplugs out. Holy shit. Jamie shooting guns is probably the most attractive thing she has ever seen in her life. They go through the same process with what Jamie tells her is a Glock G19. She readies herself to aim. "Can I shoot this sideways like a gangster?" Jamie gets the most appalled look on his face. "Not if you want to actually hit anything." Arya rests her back against the picnic table and Jamie settles his elbows on his thighs. They decided to take a break so Arya can rest her wobbly arms.
Kitty, kitty. You want me to open the door? Probably. You're probably hungry too. Huh?
Okay. She takes a drink from her water bottle and tries to ignore the fact that they're pressed up against each other again. If he wasn't going to make a big deal about it, she certainly wasn't. "What else do you have? Like rifles or shotguns?" she asks, watching him smoke. He makes everything he does look so fucking cool, and it irritates her a little. Jamie reaches over to grab her water bottle. "I have a few rifles, but not shotguns. I don't duck hunt or own a convenience store." Arya frowns at him. He has his own water. She'd seen it when he was pulling stuff out of his backpack. As he's taking a drink, she grabs a cigarette from between his fingers and takes an exaggerated inhale. Jamie doesn't react at all except to settle the bottle down next to him and sigh. He leans back to relax his arms on the table. One of which rests around her shoulders. He's turned away from her, staring off into a corpse of trees when she looks to him and asks him something. Just as her mouth opens, there's a tug and he pulls the cigarette out of her hand. He reaches for it with the opposite hand as he protests. "Hey!" She tries to lunge across to get it back, but the hand that's resting on her shoulder pins her down. "You've got to be faster," he says in that satisfied way of his. Arya shakes her head but can't help but smile. Jerk. Instead of saying anything, he nudges her closer and she rests her head on his shoulder. Arya takes a deep breath to try and calm her heart. How or when they became so comfortable in each other's spaces, she doesn't know and doesn't question, especially since she can smell that cologne or aftershave or whatever it is of his. Closing her eyes, she unconsciously nuzzles into him as he rubs a thumb up and down her arm. The cigarette he holds burns down to the filter and he drops it to let it burn itself out because he doesn't want to jostle Arya by stepping on it. He looks down slowly at her face, her eyes closed, and he uses this moment to take her all in, drink his fill of her in the quiet. There's a saucy and tough, such a saucy and tough little thing. Jamie is proud of her marksmanship and impressed with her natural ability. He'd had known men in his career that couldn't shoot that well their first time. He shuts his eyes and lifts his face up to the weak sun. Gods above, she was an amazing girl. It was it's little wonder why he's so wrapped up in her. Jamie looks down at her again, and she's so still he thinks she may have dozed off. Carefully he places his cheek on her sun-warmed hair. Dark wayward strands tickle his nose. Hey you, he says softly into her hair. Arya startles slightly and pulls herself away. She looks mildly embarrassed and scratches the side of her nose. Sorry, you're really warm and comfortable. She stands and stretches. Can I go again? Jamie chuckles and waves her on. Arya is getting more confident the more she does it, and he finds little to correct. He thinks she'll be quite good after practicing a few more times. She loads the magazine of the Glock with ease and hands it to him. Can you get that stump over there? She asks, pointing. When he hits it, she points to something else to aim for. Soon it becomes a game where she points and he shoots. Jamie removes the empty magazine and pulls out his earplugs to suggest lunch. We can wander down to the river if you want to eat there. Arya groans. Yes, I'm starving, she says dramatically and wanders over to the picnic table. Starving? Jamie asks incredulously. Look how small you are. How much can you possibly consume? She helps gather their things and packs it away. I may be small, but I can take a lot. He gives her a lopsided smile and raises an eyebrow, ready to say something inappropriate to that when he hears a voice behind him. You folks done here? Do you mind sharing? Jamie turns to find a man and a boy, both with rifles slung over their shoulders. We're just leaving, Arya answers, and Jamie directs her to pack away the guns safely. Remember to unload them. Double check to make sure. She nods seriously. He watches her for a few seconds before he goes to remove the target sheet. Wish my daughter would be interested in shooting. Just about your girl's age, too, the man says to Jamie as he's setting up stand-up targets for the boy. Jamie folds up the paper carefully and hums at him, but he's bristling at the thought that someone thinks Arya is his daughter. It then occurs to him what they look like together to an outsider. He rolls up the paper in his hands and looks to Arya, who's carefully placing the case back into his backpack. The only thing she's interested in is K-pop bands. The guy has been nattering on, and Jamie wasn't listening at all. He's too busy thinking that wherever they go out together in public, that's what people are going to assume. Does that matter to him? Does he care about that? No, not at all. He never cared about what people thought about him before, and he sure as fuck isn't going to start now. They ambled down the way they came, Jamie telling her stories about boot camp. There's this guy, Marin Tran, the biggest dipshit I've ever known. We were tasked to clean out our Berettas, and this asshole didn't unload or dry fire first. So the thing goes off and shoots the hat off a commanding officer. No shit, what happened to him? He tells her as they cross the access road they entered on. She tells him stories her great uncle Brandon told her about his time during Desert Storm. Why do they call him the Blackfish? Jamie asks, and Arya shrugs. I've always wanted to know. I met him at a dinner at your mother's, but I was entirely too chicken shit to ask. You scared? He's not even all that scary. Are you kidding? The man was big enough to tear me in half. He could still probably do it. Jamie could hear the slow rush of the river and spies a trampling of undergrowth that veers off from the trail. Curious, he tugs her fingers and follows it. They amble through for a few minutes before there's a decline neither are prepared for. Jamie slips a little, and so does Arya until she grips the back of his jacket to catch herself. Without looking behind him, he offers a hand her, and she takes it. They find themselves weaving through a mass of trillium and wild ginger. Still hand in hand, looks like we found a good spot, Jamie says, because directly ahead of them is a small pebbled beach. She releases him and runs to the water's edge. He follows, but halfway down, he takes off his bag, sits down, and wraps his arms around his knees. Arya edges closer, fingers tucked under her bag straps. Jamie watches as she takes it in before turning around to join him. Yum. Did you know about this place? She asks when she's close enough for him to hear her. Jamie shakes his head. Guess it's our lucky day. Arya sits down cross-legged beside him and fishes out the paper sack he'd thrown at her earlier. She peeks into the bag and pulls out 2 apples, 2 sandwiches wrapped in parchment paper. Unwrapping the sandwich, she opens the bread a little. This looks really good. What's in it? Jamie unwraps his roasted tomato, chervais, thyme, and olive oil. Wow, where'd you get it? She's shifting around, getting more comfortable. Where did I made it, he says defensively. To that, she looks up wide-eyed. Really? Sorry, I guess it's just weird to think you doing something so normal, like make a sandwich. Arya doesn't elaborate on why, as she thinks that, offering instead to take a bite. This is so good, she moans, mouthful of food. The sandwich is halfway to his mouth when he says, You act like you haven't eaten in days. You're the product of 2 of the wealthiest families in the country. How many Starks are there that they can afford to feed you? Wait, is that why you're hanging around me all the time? Because I feed you? God damn it, Jamie. Arya snorts. There were 6 kids, she says. It was like the Hunger Games every meal. You had to learn to move fast. It's not so bad now that John and Rob are at university. They'd eat the entire meal for 8 if they could. She takes another bite. And I hang around you all the time because she hesitates. Friends, right? Arya glances at him, her voice unsteady, and suddenly the tone of their conversation changes. Jamie examines her face. He can feel her uncertainty, see the questions behind those wide gray eyes. Friends, he says quietly, solemnly. Sure. Or he swallows thickly, shrugs his shoulders, and looks out at the slow current of the river. He can't face her because he can't build up the courage to tell her true. Can't say any of the words that would reveal in all of its raw honesty how he feels. Or, Arya asks just as quietly, and he can feel her gaze on him. Something else. Jamie swallows again, trying to push down the beating of his heart that made its way to his throat. Something else, she repeats cautiously. He wants to tease her and ask if she plans to spend the rest of the day repeating his every word just to bring levity back into the exchange. Instead, he turns to her and catches her eye. Arya searches his face and soon rewards him with a dazzling smile, before turning a bright shade of red and ducking her head. And he can't help but do the same. Jamie breaks the momentary awkwardness between them by elbowing her, pushing her to her side. She scoffs and uses her full weight to do the same. She tips him slightly, and he huffs out a laugh. They both readjust themselves, so they're side by side, cross-legged, knees touching. A comfortable weight is on his arm as Arya rests her head against him and continues to eat. He picks up his own food and does the same. "Are you crazy? It's freezing," he says as he watches her pull off her boots and peel off her socks. "Just for a minute. It won't be that bad." Arya trapezes down the water and rolls her jeans up without even dipping a toe in hers. She steps right in. "Fuck, it's cold." Jamie heaves a hearty laugh and she flips him off. "Come, join me," she hollers, taking a few more steps. "No, thank you," Jamie says and salutes her. "I trust your assessment." Ooh, hey, I know the answer to this question. It's dark and poisonous. Turn up the crazy, looking like a washed up celebrity. It looks like it's the 4th of July. Until we feel alright. Victoria should be pouring over. Victoria, like we are victorious. Victoria should be pouring over us. Victorious, tonight we are victorious. Oh. If it'll show it. If you just, nope, it's too bright. It's the first search. If you look up 1,000 pounds wild fire on AO3, it's right there. Because it's the only one with that name. Excuse me. And we are currently at the ass end of chapter 4. So, if you want to follow along while reading, there's that.
Whatever you say, coward. She turns away from him then, expecting something beneath the water. Coward? Honestly. Jamie takes off his jacket, removes his boots and socks, and creeps as soundlessly as he can to stop the clacking of the rocks under his weight. He stops just short of where she's waited to roll up his jeans as far as he can, all while keeping an eye on her. And just as he did earlier, he sweeps her up from behind, but now holds her in a bridle carry. She gasps and clings to him, one arm around his neck and the other clenched to his shirt. Arya Stark, you're no coward, are you? He smiles down at her. Why, I'd bet you'd take me up if I suggested a swim right now, wouldn't you? Arya's eyes widen in alarm as he takes a couple steps further into the river. Just a quick dip, I think it'd be rather refreshing, he jokes and sloshes another 2 steps, water almost up to his knees now. Did you spell it right? Here. I just posted the link in chat. Welcome. No, what? Never mind. Or I should've. Check your Snapchat. Ooh, do not reload the site. Oh, the links aren't showing up on my shit. I don't know why. Never mind. Okay. Water almost up to his knees now. Fuck, it is cold. You wouldn't dare, she says, whipping her head over her shoulder to gauge how close she really is to the water. No, he starts slowly, pretending he's going to release her to the mercy of the river. Arya squeals and kicks her legs, and he tries to keep hold, but she's flailing enough that he loses his grip. Her feet fall into the water, which causes another squeal and has her clambering up his body, kicking freezing cold water on them both. Jamie laughs, and now Arya is facing him, soaking wet legs wrapped around his middle, small arms around his neck. Yeah, Apollo's one of mine. Sadly. Oh. That's real quick. And we're at the ass end of like chapter 4. PlayStation in rest mode. Small arms around his neck. Take me back, she demands, laughter in her voice. He wraps his arms under her for support, though she's clinging tight enough he probably doesn't need to. So soon, he pouts, straining his neck. Alright, night. Yes, that's where we'll end it for the night. Or welcome. There's 3 people. I can continue going until I finish the chapter. Again, this will be up on my channel if you want to watch it there after the live is over. So, straining his neck back to look at her. I used to spend hours and hours in frigid water like this. I thought maybe you were interested in learning a thing or two. You do trust me, don't you? Arya pulls back to look at him. Her hands that were gripping so tightly on his neck flutter to the sides of his face, bottom lip once again caught between her teeth. I do trust you, she says gravely. It's then that she leans down and gently kisses his lips. Mere seconds and it's over, close-lipped and tentative, before she pulls away. Arya looks nowhere but his eyes, and he knows she's trying not to doubt her instincts, despite what Jamie had implied to her earlier. She's still unsure of herself. Or maybe that's his doing. Maybe what he thought was so obvious wasn't. Jamie recognizes the openness and vulnerability in her face. This isn't the first time she's brazenly stepped over some boundary and let her intentions be known. His cheek, those were the plump bow lips had touched, still burns him to this day. Oh, brave girl. His brave, beautiful girl. What a wonder she is. He shifts his weight, one arm supporting her while the other travels through her hair. He runs his fingers through the thick strands of her ponytail before cupping the back of her head and lowering it to him. Arya's lips part this time, opening to him. Her mouth is warm, and she tastes like heaty, woodsy thyme and sweetness of apple. Delicately, he meets her tongue and engages it. Jaime Lannister forgets about the cold swirling of water around his legs, the chilly early spring air that whips the tendrils of Arya's hair around his face, her age, his age. Because Jaime Lannister has fallen in love with Arya Stark. And that's where I'm ending it tonight. Good night, everyone. I will see you Wednesday.